looking forward to studying with you and reviewing this incredible time in Jewish history, particularly connected to the start of Reform Judaism in America. So really, our story at Fairmount Temple is very much connected to the American Reform Jewish story. And we'll see how that plays out today a little bit as we start to kind of see how Judaism and its practice and its rituals take shape here in America as it was influenced by life in the old country and also influenced by life here in America. And that tension, the tension of trying to sort of in some ways live in these two worlds, like every new immigrant lives in. They're carrying their history with them. They're carrying what was so sacrosanct to them. The Judaism that they lived in the old country was the authentic Judaism. So how do you then translate that into Judaism that becomes Americanized? And what does that mean for the next generations? So we're going to see that today. That's a bit of the toil and a bit of the fun of seeing the creation of Judaism in a new country and how its culture and its mores influence its practice. So great to see many of you here. I'm going to just like a few pre-flight boarding instructions. If everybody would make sure to keep their devices on mute, unless there's a time where we're going to share perspectives, if you want to ask questions. But the chat feature is a great feature to be able to ask some questions as you wish. And if I don't see the chat feature, you can always throw up your hand up. And this is like, I'm going to put that on my screen right now as a raise hand. So you can do that and let me know that you want to share something. I'm going to try to get through a bunch of material. So if I'm not able to answer every single question, please know that is the reason why. And I'll try to read the chat as you put them out there. And my goal is to find some time at the end of every class to sort of process a little bit. We'll see if that happens, because it's all about trying to get through a lot of this material. But I really do, I want to hear your perspectives on everything as well. So I think, okay, yes. So mute your devices. And if for some reason your device falls off mute and there's some ambient noise, I have like this opportunity to mute on my own. So I might do that. So don't be offended by that if that happens. Yeah, I'm really excited, everybody. This feels like a moment in our temple's history to be able to look back and you take in the sort of historical memory of our institution, our community. And so there's a, yes, and thank you, Anita. There's a document that I sent. Forgive me, I sent it yesterday, which is far too late for many of you to have read it, and I didn't expect it. And for some of you, if you didn't get that, let me know. It's called the Alsbacher document, and it really details the history of Fairmount Temple from the very beginning, at least up until a certain stage, really a little bit past the break with the Temple Tiferet Israel. So if you get a chance to read it on your own, I'm going to try to send you materials in advance as best as I can. Okay, so why don't we do the bracha, the blessing. I know it's a blessing for studying Torah, and one might think, oh, we're not exactly studying Torah today, but we are going to be looking. I think Torah is can be understood in many ways. So maybe it's Torah with a small t, Torah with a big T. But this is our history. It's part of our Torah. It's part of our story. So we'll do the blessing of B'divrei, La'asok B'divrei Torah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, God, sovereign of the universe. In your holiness, you give us the mitzvah, the opportunity to engage in the study of Torah. Okay, so I'm going to start. I'm going to what I've worked out is a lot of PowerPoint stuff, so it's just easier to present in that way, and that'll kind of keep me on track. So you know, you can follow along, and then that way I also have a record of what I've done. And if you want to see that later, we're also recording this, and it'll be preserved on YouTube. Thanks to Yael Castleberry and Elizabeth Kluckner. So thank you, Yael, who I think you're on here. Appreciate that. So we'll have these to be able to preserve. Okay. So I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to begin our presentation. Here we go. All right. I'm going to actually do, I'm going to put this on to like a little bit of a slideshow. And we started in 1839. And, you know, who would have known that back in 1839, that in 2024, this institution would still be alive, and it would have reached many different, gone through many different iterations. And so that's really remarkable. And again, if you're on your device is on, I'm going to ask everybody to mute. I'm just hearing some ambient noise, so just can make sure that your device is muted. I want to just thank a few people and a few organizations as I've been doing my research, which is ongoing. I want to show gratitude to Arnie Berger, Yael Castleberry, Myra Stone, Jane Rothstein, the American Jewish Archives, Western Reserve Historical Society, and of course this beautiful booklet that I shared with you yesterday, and called "This Tempting Freedom" by Alan Peskin. So I appreciate, and there's many other sources and resources that I found, but those are the main ones that have kind of helped me so far. So I'm grateful to all of these resources. Oh, great! Thank you so much for sharing that link, Rick. Terrific, and thank you, Marcy. Okay. So leaving Bavaria. What we have is a really, really incredible document that that tells us the story of our people, of our congregation's genesis. And it's really amazing that we have this letter, which was, of course, originally written in German, but actually we have the translation of that. And I wanted to share that. Many of you are familiar with this. I might have even shared this document before, but it is one of my favorite all-time Jewish historical documents from 1839. This is a document written by Lazarus Cohn. Lazarus Cohn was the educator and teacher in the community in Unsleben, Bavaria, where you know, the kind of origins of Anshe Chesed began. And he wrote a letter. He wrote a note to the delegation heads. There's somewhere between 15 and 19 folks from Unsleben who made the journey. This kind of official delegation that made the journey first to New York and then eventually to Cleveland. So they actually they came straight to New York first, and somebody from the Unsleben community was actually in New York and met them there, and then brought them to Cleveland. So this is a note from Lazarus Cohn to his community. And Moses and Yetta Alsbacher, it's affectionately called the Alsbacher document. Moses and Yetta were the leaders of this delegation. Here's what he says. I give you by way of saying goodbye. And this is, as you know, they're making this choice to leave Central Europe, Central Germany. And he's clearly an educator who cares about their community, but also writ large cares about the future of Judaism. I give you by way of saying goodbye a list of the names of the people of your faith with the dearest wish that you may present these names to your future heirs, yes, even to your great-grandchildren, of which you may have many. Now, by the way, thinking about great-grandchildren, like we're in that stage, maybe great-great-grandchildren, but that's about where we are in 2024. So you think about it, this letter, if you kind of, you know, fast forward ahead, he's talking about us. of which have many under the best family relationship and under pleasant economic circumstances, is very congenial. I further wish and hope that the Almighty, who reigns over the ocean as well as over dry land, to whom thunder and storms must pay heed, shall give you good angels as travel companions, so that you, my dear friends, may arrive undisturbed and healthy in body and soul at the place of your destiny in the land of freedom. I love this in so many ways. I love its content, but I also love its rhyme. I love its poetry. The idea that he's sending us with this beautiful, he's sending this delegation with this beautiful blessing, thinking about what the future may hold. What a kind of a beautiful sentiment. But the letter doesn't end here. And it's interesting. It takes a real interesting turn. And the turn it takes is a note of concern. And this is where the rubber hits the road, and it kind of gets really interesting, because Mr. Lazarus Cohn is concerned, and concerned about the future, concerned about what his people will be. And so here is that second part. And by the way, on the left is the you can find the original copy in the Maltz Museum. The left is the German, and then you can see there's some Hebrew on top as part of the poetry. Okay, but I must also, as a friend, ask a favor of you. Friends, you are traveling to a land of freedom where the opportunity will be presented to live without compulsory religious education. Resist and withstand this tempting freedom, and do not turn away from the religion of our fathers. Do not throw away your holy religion for quickly lost earthly pleasures, because your religion brings you consolation and quiet in this life, and it will bring you happiness for certain in the other life. And then, of course, just even, if he's going to lean into this even more so, don't tear yourself away from the laws in which your fathers and mothers searched for assurance and found it. The promise to remain good Jews may never and should never be broken during this trip, nor in your home life, nor when you go to sleep, nor when you rise again, echoes of Ve'ahavta, nor in the raising of your children. And now, my dear friends, have a pleasant trip, and forgive me for these honest words, to which the undersigned will forever remain true. Your friend, Lazarus Cohn, teacher. Okay, so it's quite a document. I'm grateful that it survived that trip. It's really remarkable. It says a lot about Jewish guilt. Okay, I have to say that with a little bit of a smile, but it certainly says a lot about the educator in the old country worrying about the future of his people and wondering, once we head into this new world, what will be? What will it look like? How will life be different? And will everything that we work for as Jews, be diluted by this experience of being in America and not really knowing, what was to come? So remarkable text. And again, next time you're in a Maltz Museum, you can actually take a look and see the original German, which is really wonderful. I want to continue on. So that's sort of like it's really kicking off this whole experience of thinking about the past and who we are as a people. Whoops. I'm going to go back a little bit, just a little map. And I'm just giving you a kind of a big picture map right here, so you get a sense of Europe. And you can see where Germany stands, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Czechoslovakia, and then maybe a little bit zooming in a little bit more, you can see that here's Cologne and Frankfurt. And if you go a little bit more to the east, you will find Unsleben, Bavaria. Okay, and that's where we all hail from. As a history of Jews in Bavaria, it was not a great history. Here's a quote from the Jewish Encyclopedia. There is no other kingdom in Germany where religious hatred has raged so furiously against the Jews is Bavaria, and that nowhere else has exceptional legislation against them been so persistently maintained. Life in Europe was not good for the Jews generally, but we can see that Bavaria, it was particularly there were some real heinous acts that happened in the area of Bavaria, and I think sometimes the Jewish community felt better if they could just keep their heads down and not make too much noise. This is a hard little woodcut to see, but this is a woodcut of Jews being burned alive for the alleged host desecration. Jews were accused of defiling the host, meaning the sacred bread used in the Eucharist ritual, with blood in communion in the 14th and 15th centuries. So you can see this is the area in Bavaria where our kind of the history of our temple began, was this area of sometimes latent and sometimes very overt anti-Semitism. There was lots of repression through legislation in Bavaria. The great increase of the Jewish population in Bavaria necessitated a uniform legislation, okay, which was first attempted in the Religions Edict of 1809. Under this law, the Jews were considered as a religious society, and its conditions were regulated by various orders. Then there was another edict in 1813. This edict pronounced the Jews full citizens of Bavaria as regarded their duties, but as concerned their rights, they were only half citizens. It contained many enactments in the vein of the new spirit of liberality, but side by side with them were survivals of the narrowest medievalism. So it may have given the impression that Jews were equal, but they were not. I wanted to touch on this idea of liberalism and nationalism, because there's a combination of factors that existed. And we talked a little bit about this in our Zionism course. You know, nationalism today is a real can be perceived as quite a pejorative, right? Nationalism means far right. Nationalism means exclusion of others. Nationalism means xenophobia. But in this time, nationalism was considered something, something that was an aspiration, something that you took pride in, your country, a sense of patriotism, that I belong. This is a mother country, and Jews truly, truly wanted to feel that sense of nationalism, that sense of pride in where they were from. They really did want to belong to these places that, you know, really have harbored lots of anti-Semitism. We're thinking about France, we're talking about Germany, we're talking about, of course, Russia. These were areas that where Jews were proud to be citizens, wanted to be citizens, really wished to be, and they were not allowed. Anti-Semitism in part Zionism in part was a reaction to that anti-Semitism, was a reaction to not being able to fulfill that goal of liberal nationalism. Isn't that interesting? It sounds like an oxymoron today, right? Liberal nationalism. But the idea was that the liberality came from this inclusiveness, right? This sense of like everybody's equal. The nationalism was a sense of like pride in who we were. So it was this wonderful combination of these factors of being an inclusive, diverse society that was proud of its heritage, proud of its background, proud to be nationalistic, patriotic. But that was something that evaded the Jews. The Jews were not able to really avail themselves of true nationhood, feeling part of something. They got they got bits and pieces, and these edicts were a way of kind of keeping the Jews at bay. So I'm going to share again and go back to this presentation. So, and this is from this Tempting Freedom, the booklet that I shared with you. So here it says, Peskin writes, throughout the 18th century, the Bavarian government repeatedly passed laws designed to stem the flow of Jewish migration, Jews could not settle without a permit. Those few who enjoyed the privilege were hemmed about the restrictions and humiliations. They had to wear distinctive clothes. They could not testify against Christians in court, nor could they serve them as domestic help. Their occupations were restricted, and they were burdened by extra taxes. Undeterred by these formidable legal barriers, Jews continued to settle in Bavaria, coming from places where, incredible as it may seem, they were even poorer and more despised. Some settled in the large cities, but most tended to congregate in tiny, all-Jewish villages, seldom larger than a few hundred people, of which Unsleben was a typical example. In these villages, Jews enjoyed a measure of self-government. So long as the taxes were collected and the laws obeyed, the state seldom bothered to interfere directly. That was really the idea of Jews keeping their heads down, trying not to, be bothered by, those who were in leadership, the authoritarians. And the truth is, this is a big part of our history of the last 2,000 years. Jews keeping their heads down, trying to be understood, trying to be accepted as citizens, and just maybe not poking the bear, so to speak. I wanted to just show you some pictures of a modern day Unsleben. This is actually where the synagogue was. And you can see just the beauty of Google Earth can show us where these, our kind of origins began. And then, of course, we have the Unsleben Jewish Cemetery. And you can see the sign in the cemetery cautions that the site is under the protection of the village of Unsleben. Anyone who damages it or creates mischief will be prosecuted, which is, of course, a sad reality of what was going in Germany. I think, I'm going to show you this in a minute, but I just wanted to share that for those of you who may have any thoughts about the Jewish community in Unsleben still thriving, or if anybody left, everybody's gone. The Holocaust finished that off. So if there were Jews who lived in Unsleben in the early 1900s, but they ultimately were shipped out, and they were part of the Nazi regime's final solution. So there really is there's no Jews left in Unsleben, but there are Jews in Germany, and particularly in the big cities like Berlin. Paul, Paul and Lee, I'm seeing your chat about were there Bavarian versions of pogroms. Yeah, I would, I don't know that for sure, but I think we could see what happened with the burning, of the Jews when they were accused of interfering with the host. So there were those times. I think in the 1800s, I didn't read anything about like state-sanctioned pogroms, anything like what's happened in Kiev or Kishinev. I think it was it was kind of a quiet anti-Semitism, not so quiet, but not so overt that Jews were killed or lynched, that kind of thing. So a big part of this was kind of keeping your head down, living that life. So the Jews who moved here from Unsleben were really coming here for many reasons, partially anti-Semitism, partially economic opportunity. Because of the laws, they were truly limited from, thriving in that area. And so it ended up being, kind of like after a while, you realize you can only get so far if you're a Jew living in Germany. And so, by the way, just as a kind of a note for those history buffs here, Unsleben it came under Bavarian and German authority, only after the Holy Roman Empire. Holy Roman Empire, by some accounts, lasted 1,000 years. So, we're talking about like into the 1500s, 1600s, even 1800s. Like doing some research, even into the early 1800s, the Holy Roman Empire was in charge of certain parts of Germany. And so, we think about how it changed hands, but that's how long the Roman Empire lasted. And then it sort of started to become like these little city states, and then Lower Franconia until Germany was kind of incorporated all of these areas. Okay, so we got, I mean, as nice as it is to talk about Unsleben, Bavaria, we could talk about the move, right? How did they get here? So let's talk a little bit about that, and that will be, I think that will help us get a handle on the next steps. Okay, so, oh yeah, good. Thanks, Bill, for putting in the Wikipedia. Go for it. Okay. So that is, and you can go to the cemetery today, by the way. Maybe someday our temple, a combined congregation Mishkan, or we'll make a pilgrimage to Unsleben. Okay. Okay. These two are Simpson and Regina Klein, by the way. Simpson and Regina was Rachel Klein. She changed her name to Regina to Americanize it. They arrived 2 years before the delegation in 1839 arrived. So it wasn't, the official Cleveland Jewish community was not established until after they arrived, but there were Jews who lived in, Cleveland area before 1839, but they couldn't really create the community that was that happened after this Alsbacher delegation came. Just like a little piece about the arrival in town. And again, this is coming from Peskin, who wrote, and I'm just having a little trouble accessing this. Okay. Months later, worn out from their tedious, uncomfortable passage, the immigrants landed in New York. Simpson Thorman was there to meet them at the dock and escort them to the western city of Cleveland, where he had made his home for the past 2 years. Although it had less than 6,000 people, far-sighted observers predicted a bright future for this growing lake port, and Thorman was able to convince his friends of the opportunities it offered. With the arrival of the Unsleben party, the history of the Cleveland Jewish community begins. And there had, of course, been occasional Jewish settlers in the Cleveland region. We talked about this. Other Jews had drifted in and out. A handful of settlers does not make a Jewish community, though. And as Peskin writes, a community requires cohesiveness, common purpose, and institutions. It is more than just a collection of individuals, as we very much know. The Unsleben, the last sentence, the Unsleben settlers gave Cleveland Judaism more than a minion. They provided an indispensable spark of common purpose to kindle the community enterprise of Cleveland's Jews. And here we go for the first synagogue. The original synagogue was the progenitor of Cleveland's organized Jewish community, but its beginnings were modest enough by any standard. Services were held in various private houses, and the only salaried functionary was Sekela Hopferman, who served as a combination of chazan and shochet. Shochet is a ritual slaughter, and of course a chazan is a cantor. How about that? We should ask Cantor Lappin if he thinks he'd be interested in being both a ritual slaughter and a cantor, that he doesn't realize that was put in the small print in his contract to, start running a butcher house. So this is, you had to be all purpose here. You didn't have a lot of Jewish professionals in town. So he made $50 a year, and the congregation got its money's worth from the versatile Hopferman. In addition to these services, he contributed the Torah his family had carried from Bavaria. And within a year or so, the congregation felt the need for larger quarters, and that's at the Water Street and Vineyard Lane, which is now West 9th and Columbus Road. So West 9th and East 9th, by the way, are big, big history connections for us and where our communities settled. We have got, we have a Roscoff Torah, actually, so it's perfect timing, Susan. The small Torah that we have is believed to be the Torah that was brought over from Unsleben, and it's very light. Maybe it's very small. And of course, Karl Roscoff was one of those founders who came not with the delegation in 1839, but just later that year. And he is the great grandfather of a Fairmount Temple member, Don Roscoff. So gotta love the beard, folks. Those very distinguished. And of course, like interestingly enough, there's this wonderful story about a man named Kahnweiler who was ostensibly like a kind of a peddler. Did not come with that delegation, the original Alsbacher delegation, but was from Bavaria, and he was in town. And who knows if he actually was a Clevelander? He may have just been an itinerant peddler, but he died. And what happens when a community just established in 1840, 1 year after they arrive, has to bury somebody, a Jew? He is the first Jew to ever been buried in Cleveland. And that actual gravestone still exists at the Willett Street Cemetery. And we are almost done with the help of Jeff Morris, who heads up our Mayfield Cemetery, to create a tribute to this special stone, and because you can see how worn it is, to remember Alexander Kahnweiler. So this was the first thing that our community did before they even like built a building. Remember, they lived like they rented rooms. Before they built a building, they built a cemetery. One of the things that a Jewish community needs to build when they first arrive in a community. All right. And but as we understand it and looking at the dates, we kind of think that the community was quite scurrying at the time to buy the land, to have a cemetery, to be able to bury this guy. And so there are some indications that Kahnweiler actually had to hang around for a while. Like they wasn't able to bury him as quickly as we usually like to do in Jewish law. And so if we start looking at the dates, we can kind of see that he was buried, a little later after he died. Could be like 2 weeks. If you can see on the stone, it says he died on August 7th, but the burial says that he was buried on Tisha B'Av, which was like 2 weeks later. So that might have been, that interim time of 2 weeks might have been the time where the Jewish community was like, moving very quickly to try to secure land. And that is really the first kind of brick and mortar, connection that our community had, that owned some piece of land. It was the Willett Street Cemetery, which of course still exists today. But of course, now we have Mayfield Cemetery. All right. Now, of course, when there's Jews, there's many opinions. And so, of course, there was a split. There were a couple of splits that happened. This happened all around American Jewish life. Okay, so less than 2 years after the formation of the first synagogue, Cleveland Jews began their first quarrel. All right, I don't like that Vishamru. I like the other Vishamru. No, it didn't probably happen like that, but there were some problems, right? In 1841, the Israelite congregation, that was the original name, folks. A lot of people think it was Anshe Chesed. The first name of our community was Israelite congregation, was split asunder when the great part of the membership walked out and formed their own congregation, Anshe Chesed. So Anshe Chesed is actually a break-off of the original Israelite congregation. Renting a room next to the Masonic Hall on Prospect Street, they applied for a charter from the state, began operations. In competition with the original Israelite congregation. From its very first days, Anshe Chesed demonstrated a trait that would continue to distinguish this congregation: a devotion to education. And that is a hallmark of who we have been. Going back, if we continue on through the years, Libby Braverman, and we talk about Alan Bennett and Judy Lichtig, education was professionalized at Fairmount Temple, and that's something we'll certainly get to. All right, the two congregations pursued their separate paths for a few years, even though the Cleveland Jewish community was scarcely large enough to support one congregation, much less two. Anshe Chesed had a school. The Israelite congregation had a cemetery. What do you do? Logic would seem that you do a merger, but often logic has to be prodded by necessity. In 1845, the Water Street building used by the Israelite congregation burned down. Only Simpson Hofferman's Torah was salvaged from the blaze. Everything else was destroyed. And a reunion with Anshe Chesed was a necessity. And out of the flames emerged the Israelitic Anshe Chesed Society of Cleveland. Just throw those names together, and 60 members, once more, a united voice of Cleveland Jewry. Okay, so that's, at least we're together for a moment until 1850. All right, this was from the Cleveland Jewish Society book in 1917. It said, Tiferet Israel was regarded as the Reform and Anshe Chesed, the Orthodox congregation. And here's the interesting part, right? We was talking about at the beginning, is like, what are the minhagim? What are the customs that you bring from Europe and the customs that you have here in America? How do you adapt? Anshe Chesed has its shochet, right? Had its ritual slaughterer, also a committee to zealously guard the meat sold to members of its congregation to see that it contained the necessary kosher seal. The first move in that direction of reform in this congregation was the abbreviation of the Sabbath service, and so on and so forth, right? It was decided to engage a cantor and a leader. Remember, there weren't a lot of Jewish leaders back then. There weren't a lot of Jewish professionals, so they had to kind of cobble it together. But what I really wanted to focus on is this sort of this period of time where reform, the pangs of Reform Judaism are starting to arise. And somebody named Isaac Mayer Wise, of course, he is the George Washington of American Reform Judaism. Isaac Mayer Wise basically brought Reform Judaism into America. And what did that mean? It's not Reform Judaism as we know it today, but it was really an attempt to unify the Jewish communities that had made their journey from abroad. He was seeing that there were different minhagim, there were different customs that were arising. There was a minhag, Hungarian minhag, and there was a German minhag. And so that's why, by the way, these different congregations were established by different communities. B'nai Yeshurun originally was established with the Hungarian communities. So these communities stayed together, and they stayed together because they knew their particular, they were very comfortable with their own customs and they wanted to keep them. But what happens when the rubber hits the road and you have to sort of deal with American sensibilities at the same time? So this was the thing. And the sort of the genius of Isaac Mayer Wise was to see that this was happening and to try to find a way to unify the community. And so what I wanted to do was, sort of the remainder of our time, is to look at how that impacted even our communities here in Cleveland, how creating a new minhag called Minhag America. Again, minhag means custom, okay? So imagine you have minhag Hungarian, you have minhag Germany, you may even have minhag Bavaria, but here we go. What would it look like if we actually created an American minhag, an American custom for prayer, for ritual? Yes, absolutely, Vera. Same thing, right? People bring their ethnicity with them, and sometimes it's hard to split the ethnicity with religion, right? They see it as the same thing because their cultures and the food, it's all connected to their ethnicity. So what I really wanted to look at is a little bit of that kind of Minhag America. And here's by the way, here's a picture of Eagle Street. So at this time when we're starting to flirt with Reform Judaism, you can see that we've got these two, by the way, this is the same temple, right? It's just different. It's a side view and it's a front view. This is what Eagle Street Temple looks like. And today we understand it to today Progressive Field. I've heard whether it's outfield or infield, I'm not exactly sure, but basically that is where Eagle Street Temple stood. And that was our first brick and mortar after the cemetery was built. This was the unified congregation eventually of Anshe Chesed, an Israelitic community. Okay, so this is what it looked like. And you can see, right? these weren't, think about Fairmount Temple now and what it looks like. It is pretty prominent, right? You're passing, you're driving in on Fairmount Boulevard, either east or west, and you can see that beyond that parking lot is a big institution. It screams religious institution, but look what we're seeing here. And by the way, we could do a whole course on just architecture, but look at, this is very similar to the way Jewish congregations were built in this time. Tell me just in a quick moment, and I'm just a little bit opportunity to ask you a question. As you're looking at this picture, what does it, you could throw it in the chat. What does it look like? What do you think was going on? What do you think it was trying to convey? How do you think it sort of merged with American tradition? Hard to see, no Jewish stars. It looks like, that's right, sorry. It looks like a church, right, Tali? Yeah, it looks like a church. Okay, so we're also, now we're trying to blend in, right? We don't want to look too different, right? No Jewish stars, not a lot of iconography on the outside, not a lot of stained glass windows we can see, solid, stable, right? It looks like it could be a residence, it could be, in a little bit. So it's got, pillars look like Torah scrolls. I like that. I wonder if that was maybe the intention. I doubt it, but yeah, missing a steeple, but it's very humble, right? I mean, it's a little bit bigger than maybe what's next to it on that side view. Whoops. But, otherwise it's kind of humble. And that's the way Jewish congregations were built back then. All right. So how did I trying to, okay, good. Didn't want to draw attention to itself. Absolutely, right? Absolutely. You're trying to blend in these days. All right. Minhag America. I found this really good quote. In 1857, a leading reform-minded rabbi in America, Isaac Mayer Wise, published a prayer book he called Minhag America. By the way, for those old-timers, Reformed Jewish old-timers, this was the precursor to the Union Prayer Book. Published a prayer book he called Minhag America. With this publication, he attempted to unify American Jews around a single text of prayer, which of course faced immediate opposition and eventual failure. More radical reformers felt the book was too traditional, and more traditional Jews considered it too radical. That sounds really Jewish, right? That's why everybody builds another temple, because it's like, oh, it's too traditional, it's too progressive, whatever it may be. But this was the tension at the time, is can I bring my tradition with me? Do I have to abandon it? Can I merge these ideas? This was the genius of Isaac Mayer Wise. So I wanted to share with you this little video. It's too long, so I'm going to just share a snippet of it to give you like a kind of a snapshot of how this kind of, just the context of the time. But I think I have to put a little bit of, I have to share my sound here. So hang on, here we go.
(1791). Dear and worthy parents, you cannot imagine what kind of Jews they have here in Virginia. They are all German itinerants who made a living by begging in Germany. They came to America during the war as soldiers, and now they wouldn't recognize themselves. One can make a good living here, and all live in peace. Anyone can do what he wants. There is no rabbi in all of America to issue a cherem against anyone. Rebecca Samuel.
Cherem is to excommunicate somebody who is acting inappropriately.
In 1840, a Jewish immigrant from Bavaria named Abraham Rice landed in Rhode Island. He was the first ordained rabbi ever to set foot on American soil. Some months later, Rice was invited to become leader of Congregation Nidchei Yisrael in Baltimore, and was horrified by what he found there. As far back as the 1790s, some American Jews had expressed a desire to establish a unified national rabbinate in the mold of those in the Old World, bodies that would bring the community back under one law and one tradition. But they were in the minority, and by 1840, the American Jewry that Rice discovered was a nation of Sabbath breakers and Spinozists. Every synagogue prayed from a different prayer book. Women attended Shabbat services in equal numbers to men, and in some places sat alongside them. Children were not expected to keep kosher outside of the home. Young men got tattoos. Old men were given Masonic funerals in Jewish cemeteries. Intermarriage was rampant. Before the end of the decade, Rice resigned from his post in disgust, by which time many more rabbis had arrived in America, each making their own attempts to unify the community. They came from every stream of Jewish thought, and all of them would fail. Jewish immigrants were arriving from every country in which they were known to live, faster than any rabbi could hope to serve them. A new Jerusalem, a great Jewish community every bit the equal of London, Amsterdam, and Odessa, was emerging from what had previously been a tiny hamlet on the far side of the world. Within a generation, American Jews would take each other's lives in a battle for the soul of the nation. And by the time American Jewish leaders did find the strength to unite under a single set of principles, their efforts would be utterly swept aside in the face of an unprecedented new era. When we last left off, the newly independent United States was home to 2,000 Jews spread across 5 cities: New York, Philadelphia, Richmond, Charleston, and Savannah. The Jews of Rhode Island had dispersed, having mostly supported the British in the Revolutionary War. But no sooner had the war ended than the former leader of the Rhode Island synagogue, Isaac Turo, died, leading his pro-revolutionary wife and children to return and settle in Boston with some in-laws. In 1830, a proper Jewish community was established there with the arrival of refugees fleeing the French invasion of Algeria. But by that time, Turo's eldest son Judah had long since become a shopkeeper in New Orleans. When he first arrived...
By the way, Judah Toro actually helped finance the building of the Temple Tiferet Israel in 1850.
Arrived in 1800, Louisiana was still part of the Spanish Empire, where Jews were forbidden. But following its annexation to the U.S. just 3 years later, Turo helped establish a Jewish community there. This is a typical illustration of Jewish America in the early 19th century, gradually expanding, but still few in number and limited to a handful of communities. Over the course of this period, some Jews did immigrate to the U.S., but these were overwhelmingly Caribbean and North African Jews who already had family ties to America. So too did Jews continue to face some legal inequalities. While the U.S. Constitution ensured the free exercise of religion and prohibited religious tests for federal office, the legal consensus of the time was that these laws didn't apply to states. In 1820, 7 U.S. states still barred non-Christians from public office. But if change was slow to reach American Jews from without, there were enormous changes going on within, and none more so than the proliferation of the Hamburg-based Reform movement. Faced with increasing assimilation and intermarriage, many American synagogues began looking for ways to impose some measure of religious order, often making congregations less democratic and more exclusionary. These were the circumstances under which the Charleston newspaper editor Isaac Harvey and several local Jewish families boycotted the city's main synagogue, Bet Elohim, and established the Reformed Society of Israelites, which not only introduced Reform Judaism to the Americas, but also gave the movement its name. Sure enough, by 1830, Bet Elohim gave in to the Reformed Society's demands and became the first Reformed synagogue in the New World. By mid-century, the majority of American synagogues had joined the Reform movement. Though it originated in Europe, Reform Judaism was exceptionally well suited to the way Judaism was already being practiced in the United States, and it's probably worth discussing why. In my video on colonial America, I noted that there were no rabbis in what became the United States until the 19th century, but that was only a symptom. Even in 1830, the Jewish population of the US was only around 6,000. Being so few in number across such a large area for such a long time, strict adherence to Jewish law outside the confines of the home or the synagogue was simply logistically impossible. So a distinctly Jewish American tradition had emerged, which rejected religious observance in the day-to-day as a practicality, but resolutely upheld the traditions of Jewish holidays and life events. Only when Jewish immigrants began arriving in much larger numbers in the 1840s did the first rabbis appear on the continent to grapple with this unfamiliar American Judaism. Throughout that decade, increasingly conservative and religious rule in Bavaria led tens of thousands of Bavarian liberals, including Jews, to emigrate to the US, one of whom happened to be Abraham Rice, the first American rabbi. A subscriber to the modern Orthodox movement, Rice was unhappy with the general absence of religious observance, blaming it for the widespread assimilation of the time. More than a quarter of American Jews at this time had a Gentile spouse, a rate that wouldn't be achieved again until the 1990s. The first Jewish member of the House of Representatives was a leading figure in the anti-immigrant Know Nothing Party, who campaigned in support of mandatory Protestant prayer in public schools and led a riot against Irish immigrants in Philadelphia.
All right, we could go on. It's interesting. I'm happy to share the link with you. But you get the sense that there is something that needs to be created, and this Minhag America really did take hold. And so I wanted to share with you. Whoops, and I'm seeing that there is a no rabbis before 1840. Yeah, the truth of the matter is, Tali, that the communities moved here before their rabbis did. So the communities moved here out of a necessity, economic, kitchen table issues, and they really resolved that they would figure it out once they were here. And they probably didn't actually know what form their Judaism was going to look like or take. Eventually, what they needed to do was find ways to import rabbis, essentially, from the old world. And that's what happened. Rabbis who first end up leading the Temple Tiferet Israel and Anshe Chesed were imported from Germany, and their bona fides came from studying in like seminaries, in like kind of hallowed seminaries abroad, but there were no seminaries, right? So I know it's hard to imagine this. People think that like Orthodox Judaism came before Reform, but actually Judaism was just Judaism, was just traditional Judaism. Reform pangs to create a movement that was different than the traditional life that was being lived forced the other movements to declare themselves separate from Reform. So Reform Judaism was truly like the first defined movement in terms of streams of Judaism. Once Reform was kind of created, the conservative movement started to pull away and said, wait a minute, this is not what we want as Jews. And then the modern Orthodox movement was really created from that. And that was a great opportunity for the modern Orthodox movement to say, oh, well, maybe we don't like life the way it's lived traditionally as it's been lived. Perhaps we can merge science and, and life as a modern Jew. So, not a lot of rabbis. And so congregations were trying to share rabbis. We're going to get next time to talk about Isidore Kalish, who actually was the rabbi of Anshe Chesed. And in the very same year, there was a split between the congregations, and he went over to Tiferet Israel. So in 1850, that was the split that created that. So Isidore Kalish was really the first rabbi of our congregations. So it was hard. It was like, think about these small congregations in the middle of the country that there's not a lot of rabbis who are going to seminary these days. They're really searching, they're trying to like cobble it together. And that's what these congregations were doing. And sometimes it was like a package deal, right? You get somebody who was a moil, but he could also lead services. You'll find that most of the congregations that actually started here in this country, they were led by cantors first, and why is that? The sort of the most pragmatic way to think of it is like the chazan was somebody who knew the ritual, right? That knew the music, and that was the glue of the congregation, was the cohesion, all the singing and those prayers. You needed somebody to lead you in that. And so then there was also a big divide in like, oh, do we need a rabbi? Do we need someone who's going to preach to us in German or in English? Or do we need a chazan? Do we need somebody who's going to lead us ritually? It seemed like too much of an indulgence to have two. And then maybe you got lucky if you had somebody who could like sing and who could lead the congregation ritually, and also you could have somebody who preached to you. So these were the challenges of the day. Mail order brides, yes. Thanks, Susan. Sort of, yeah. Mail order rabbis or something like that. Okay, so I think the final piece I wanted to share with you was, oh, yes. So this is a little excerpt because you're probably like, what's this Minhag America anyway? I wanted to just give you an excerpt. This is, again, the precursor to the Union Prayer Book, which was really the first kind of official Reform movement prayer book. But this was the precursor. This was Isaac Mayer. Minhag America was Isaac Mayer Wise's sort of baby. And by the way, one of the editors was like one of the rabbis at Anshe Chesed. So like this is in the offing. And Isaac Mayer Wise was keeping an eye on the Cleveland community, right? This founder of American Reform Judaism. He was keeping an eye on the community because he could see that there was this kind of toil between tradition and reform and how they work together. So neither community, the Temple Tiferet Israel or Anshe Chesed, could truly sort of make decisions until a little bit later. Now they're a clergy. That's true. Yes, that's right, Wendy. It's an embarrassment of riches. I want to share with you as we kind of conclude this prayer for Passover, which was in the Minhag America, and I want you to think about it as people who are like creating this, who are immigrants, right? They're coming from this land. Think about it. They're coming from Germany. They're coming from a place that didn't really want them. And think about the connection they felt to Passover. My God and Lord, the festival of Passover has come, the joyful feast of the memorial of the days of Jubilee, when thou didst redeem our forefathers from inhumane oppression and didst carry them with outstretched hand into the beautiful land of liberty, from the dark abode of error and false belief into the sunny realms of knowledge, right? Think about this. It's like prayer for Passover. We're talking about knowledge and like freedom, but it's a different kind of freedom, right? It's like freedom of thought, like freedom, right? Legal freedom. Okay, and the pure, let's see. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I have it. Let's see if I can find. I hope I have it. Maybe I don't. Oh yeah, here it is. That's funny. Okay. Thanks for your patience. Hang on. Okay. So, and then I just took a little excerpt here. We have passed through more than one Egypt. I love that, right? Hatred and prejudice laid a heavy yoke upon our necks, but through the darkness of misery and oppression, a ray of thy grace continually shone above us and has at last brought on a morning of redemption in which our human dignity is recognized, right? This, all they wanted was dignity. They wanted to feel like they were equal, a sense of nationhood, right? That's the connection, by the way, of Jews to nationhood, Jews to a state of Israel, right? They were liberal nationalists. They wanted a place that they could call home. And we live free and undisturbed under the protection of mild and just laws, right? Not like those laws in Bavaria that tried to cut us out. Oh, mayest thou, all good Father, be further with us, as in those days thou didst burst the chains in which our fathers sighed, and with an awful hand break the yoke of bondage and tyranny. So mayest thou deliver and redeem our souls from the degrading yoke of sin and passion, that they may rise with untrammeled, victorious power above all attacks and temptations, and as though thou didst hurl from their altars the numberless idols and gods of Egypt, so may thy boundless mercy assist us also to subdue and destroy all the idols of vanity and worldly pleasure, that all our inner parts may be filled with thee, thou incomparable, exalted, and glorious being, thoroughly permeated by filial faithfulness and love, by unshaken, unchangeable confidence and unbounded attachment to thee, who art the shield and savior of every single being, as well as the whole nations, and art nigh unto them with thy help in trouble and suffering. And it's, and then the final prayer, blessed be thou, sanctifiest Israel in the festival. Can you imagine reading this during the Passover Seder? It's very grand, right? But it's like, think about it. When you read that, what comes up for you? What do you think about when you're reading it? What does it kind of convey to you as you heard that? What are you thinking about these Germans in mid-19th century America? What are they trying to convey? You're welcome to unmute. I know we're at 10:15. If those of you need to roll off, go ahead, but I'm willing to stay on for a couple more minutes if anybody wants to process more. And next week we'll continue on and talk about the first rabbis and the split. But or any reactions at all to today. Sounds like they felt super oppressed in their previous homes. Yeah, absolutely, right? They're thanking God for for bringing, kind of saving them from this Pharaoh. Maybe that was Germany. They are thankful for freedom of America, right? Like it was their promised land, right? I mean, this is a time also where there was questions about about Zionism and what did it mean to want a Jewish home in Palestine, right? It wasn't Israel then. So what does that mean? Does that mean then that are we rejecting America by having by wishing for a Jewish home in Palestine? It's hard. It's easy for us today to think, oh, some Jews should live in Israel, some Jews should live in diaspora. It doesn't matter. But those days, it didn't feel like that. It felt like, where's our promised land? Where's our destination? Right? Leah and Paul, it's a story we can all say we are the result of. Yes, they are now recognized as a full citizen, allowed to openly practice a breath of fresh air, but maybe also from the challenges of traditional Judaism. Yeah, this was the tough part, right? Like, how do you navigate this new world? Next year in Jerusalem. I believe so. I haven't looked at an old, Reform Haggadah from that time. It's a really good question. I imagine they did Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim, but it might have been like an idea, the idea of Israel as opposed to like actual moving there, right? So yeah, interesting origins that we have. And our story here in Cleveland is very similar to the story of many Jews in America, coming over, trying to find a home, trying to not let this tempting freedom, sabotage the Judaism that we were we were born with. And Lazarus Cohen, the educator, who says, don't give in to this tempting freedom. So I guess the ultimate question is, does Lazarus Cohen, that educator who wrote the Alsbacher document before, the kind of little bit of guilt in there, how would he feel today? What would his take be on Judaism in 2024? Would he feel particularly like the community from Unsleben, we are honoring that community and living our Judaism the way we are today? Would he see us as a failure? That we sort of set aside, cast aside, jettison traditional Judaism. We gave into the tempting freedom. We'll never know. But I can imagine, I'd like to think that the community that established here in Cleveland did not die. And that the community renewed itself and evolved as Judaism evolves. As Mordechai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, said, Judaism is an evolving religious civilization. You have to continue evolving and growing as Jews, as a community. That's what we're doing with Congregation Mishkan Or. Never came to Cleveland. Nope. Lazarus Cohen stayed in Unsleben his whole life. So, yeah. And I think I saw that Don Roscoff was on here at one point. So I don't know if he's on here now, but I think I saw him. So we'll have to pay him honor too, as his great grandfather was one of the first that came over. And there are many legacy connections to our temple. So next week, we'll continue on with the journey of Anshe Chesed Fairmount Temple and its origins. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well done. Thank you, Rabbi.
you.
Very interesting.
Very.
Good call. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nicely done, Asher.
Rabbi,
Yes.
oh, sorry.
Yes.
First of all, last night was a spectacular success in many ways. So Yasher Koach.
Thank you.
I read most of the document at your urging this morning. I haven't finished it yet. And I've heard the story of how Cleveland Jews got here many, many, many times, but the detail was lacking. It is hugely, I think it's an important read. And I'm sure that
Sure.
the Historical Society has that document. Is that what you said?
Yeah, the Maltz Museum.
Okay.
Oh,
So in
yeah. There's a lot out there.
Well,
There's a lot
that's-
out there, but
well, I never
yeah.
read it,
So
and I will tell you, I find in many ways a sense of beshert with our going and joining with Tifereth Israel. I did not know that until very recently, that we were one congregation at one point. Very interesting.
right. Very
And
cool.
think about the symbolism. And
know.
thank you for not bastardizing the name, taking one from them and one from us. I like the new name.
Yes, me too. I have to get going. I actually have a congregation Mishkan or joint clergy meeting. So, and I'm at
All
home
right.
because that has better Wi-Fi at home.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
See you next
Well
week,
done.
everybody. Great to have everybody
Bye,
on.
everybody.